So we're going to start actually today's session with a quick poll, just to kind of get you in the mood, I guess. And Raj, I will just ask you to switch this poll on, and if you can all vote, we'd be very much appreciative of your response to the question that you'll be seeing very shortly.
Okay, thank you for voting. I can see that not many of you well, all of you, sorry, didn't attend the information sessions that we arranged, but not to worry, because there will be some more support available as well as the webinar, so hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that you did have. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Okay, so we'll get cracking on now. Okay, so in front of us is the agenda for today, and that's going to give you a bit of an overview of what we'll be covering. Now, I'll be starting by giving you a quick introduction to Key Action 3 and what funding is available. Now, the main focus of the session will be the application form. Now, we'll first talk you through what you need to do beforehand. Then we'll go through the application form itself together, filling out certain parts, showing you how to use the distance calculator, and also how to validate the form. Then we'll have a roundup of the key points. Now finally, we'll mention the next steps and how to contact us for support in the run-up to the deadline. Okay, so Key Action 3 is all about supporting policy reform. It enables organisations, policymakers, and a range of other actors to become involved in strategic activities that will support policy reform across the EU in education, training and youth. Now the ultimate aim of these activities is to help achieve the goals of the Europe 2020 strategy, ET 2020, which is the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, and the European Youth Strategy. Now under Key Action 3, the national agencies responsible for managing structured dialogue, meetings between young people and decision makers in the field of youth. Now the UK national agency is a partnership between the British Council and Ecorus, and Key Action 3 structured dialogue is being managed by ourselves here at Ecorus UK. Now other types of projects under Key Action 3, such as cooperation with international organisations, are managed essentially by the Executive Agency of the European Commission. Now we won't be talking about those actions during this webinar today, but you can find out more information in Part B of the programme guide on pages 183 to 184. Okay, so structured dialogue with young people serves as a forum for continuous joint reflection on the priorities, implementation and follow-up of European cooperation in the youth field. It involves regular consultations of young people and youth organisations at all levels in EU countries, as well as dialogue between youth representatives and policymakers at EU youth conferences organised by the Member States holding the EU presidency and during the European Youth Week. The structured dialogue focuses on a different overall thematic priority for each of its 18-month work cycles set out by the Council of Youth Ministers. The thematic priority of the trio presidency, current trio presidents, that's for Netherlands, Slovakia and Malta, for January 2016 through to June 2017, is enabling all young people to engage in a diverse, connected and inclusive Europe. They define, or they phrase that as ready for life, ready for society. Structured dialogue with young people is conducted around the current thematic priority at both national and EU level. In the Member States, the participatory process is organised and ensured by national working groups comprising, amongst others, representatives of youth ministries, national youth councils, local and regional youth councils, youth organisations, young people from diverse backgrounds, as well as young youth researchers. Now, the programme guide details the types of activities that can be funded under this action. Participating organisations can run a range of meetings which can include, and I'll give you a list of these, debate and information events linked to the activities of the European Youth Week, events stimulating or simulating the functioning of the democratic institutions, meetings that offer space for the active participation of young people on issues which are relevant to structured dialogue or the EU Youth Strategy, meetings that prepare the ground for official youth conferences run by the Member State holding the presidency of the European Union, and other meetings, consultations or debates between young people and decision makers. Now, page 185 of the programme guide has a little more detail on what these other meetings can look like. It is important that young people lead on the activities and that they are actively involved in all stages of the project, from preparation to follow-up. Statutory meetings of organisations or politically influenced events, however, are not eligible for funding. Okay, so it's important to link your Key Action 3 project to the overarching European priorities and show the added value of carrying out your project on a European level. When doing so, it's important to keep the general objective of the Erasmus Plus programme in mind. Now, more information about this can be found in Part A of the Erasmus Plus programme guide, as well as the following important features of the Erasmus Plus programme. I'm going to list these again. So, recognition and validation of skills and qualifications, for example, Youth Pass in the field of youth. A dissemination and exploitation of project results, for example, the use of Erasmus Plus logo as well as the Erasmus Plus project results platform. Open access requirement for educational materials, documents and media produced through Erasmus Plus. International dimension, that's to say cooperation with partner countries. Multilingualism, that's by giving the young people the chance to pick up a few words in another language when they communicate with other young people abroad. Equity and inclusion, for example, by facilitating the access to learners with disadvantaged backgrounds and fewer opportunities compared to their peers. Protection and safety of participants, by making sure all participants are in possession of a European health insurance card, for example. Now, please also have a look at the specific objectives in the field of youth on page 28 of the programme guide. Like, for example, again, I'm going to list these. To improve the level of key competencies and skills of young people, to foster quality improvements in youth work, to complement policy reforms at local, regional and national level, and to support the development of knowledge and evidence-based youth policy, as well as the recognition of non-formal and informal learning, to enhance the international dimension of youth activities and the role of youth workers and organisations as support structures for young people in complementarity with the European Union's external action. Okay, so what is a Key Action 3 structured dialogue project? Now, projects funded under this action allow young people to get involved in dialogue with policymakers and stakeholder organisations. Projects aim to promote the active participation of young people in democratic life and to foster debate around the priorities set by the structured dialogue process and the renewed political framework in the youth field. The meetings and initiatives that take place in a Key Action 3 structured dialogue project fall under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. These are also the two activity types that you can select in the application form. Structured dialogue projects include at least one organisation active in the field of youth from a programme country. However, projects that foresee international meetings need to include a minimum of 2 organisations from 2 different countries. Organisations from partner countries neighbouring the EU can participate, but only as partners. If two or more organisations are involved, one organisation applies for funding on behalf of the whole partnership and has overall responsibility for managing the funding if the project application is successful. Structured dialogue projects can last between 3 months and 2 years, and you will build your project budget from a series of contributions to unit and actual cost activity up to a maximum budget of €50,000 per project. Now, once you've decided what it is you want to do, you've set up a partnership and thought about how to address different European priorities, you will need to complete the 2 following registration steps. Okay, so you'll need to register on ECAS first. Now, ECAS is the European Commission Authentication Service, and you will need to register here to use any type of external European Commission tool. Now, we do have a video on our website, which is a guide, which will talk you through how to do this, and you can find the link in your handout. You will then need to obtain a participant identification code. That's a PIC, for short, a PIC, to access the participant portal. Now, the participant portal is the single entry point for the electronic administration of EU-funded projects related to the Erasmus Plus programme. You will be prompted to provide information about your organisation, as well as to upload documents related to your organisation. These documents are needed to prove the legal status and financial capacity of your organisation, and it is essential that the information on these documents matches the information on the portal. If your organisation already has a PIC, a PIC, you should use that one and not create a new one. Please make sure all the information is still up to date. If your organisation does not have a PIC, and please double check that, you will need to obtain one. Now note, if you are applying for a new PIC, make sure you register onto the correct participant portal. Now, the link provided in the handout is for the Education, Audiovisual, Culture, Citizenship and Volunteering portal. Now, that's the correct one. However, if you were simply to search on the internet, you might come across the Research Participant portal, which is not the correct portal for the Erasmus Plus programme. Now, you can find further information about the application process in Part C of the programme guide. Now, if applicable, please download partner mandate templates from our website and have them filled in by your respective partners and signed by both parties. Make sure that all the information, such as the name of the organisation, address, and legal representative on the partner mandate is identical to the information in the application form. If you don't, I'm afraid the partner mandate will not be accepted. So after your brainstorming and the registration, you can move on to the application form. Now, the application form is an eForm and will need to be submitted online by the applicant organisation by the deadline of the 26th of April 2016. Now, please keep in mind that this is an 11 AM UK time, as the deadline for applications is 12 AM Brussels time. Now, you will need to use your PIC as well as your partner's PICs to fill out the application form. It's very important that the PIC information is correct, as it will be used throughout the life of your project, and it is your responsibility to keep the information up to date. Now, to make sure you have the correct Key Action 3 application form in front of you, you should check to make sure that it states Core 2016, Round 2, and also for the 26th of April 2016 deadline. We will actually in a short while show you an example of an application, and you'll see this for yourself. Now, all applications submitted to the UK National Agency should be completed in English. Now, we'll now go through into the actual application form and run through it with you. As we go along, we'll show you how to complete some sections of the form, as well as giving you hints and tips based on feedback from previous application rounds. Now, we'll be using a test application form for this exercise, as we cannot use applications from previous rounds due to data protection rules. Okay, so I'm going to change the view on our screen and hopefully bring up the application form. Okay, so you should be able to see the application form on your screen now. Okay, so this application form, as I've just mentioned actually, is an eForm, and it is available to download from the Apply for Youth Dialogue funding page on the Erasmus Plus website under Key Action 3. Now you should save it as a PDF to your local computer. Again, as I previously mentioned, if you can check to make sure that you've downloaded the correct application form for the second round of 2016. Now, if we just scroll down here, hopefully we'll be able to see what I mean by that. Okay, so you'll see here the key action is support for policy reform. The action itself is stakeholder dialogue and promotion. The action type is dialogue between young people and policy makers. The call is 2016 and the application round is round 2. And you'll see there the deadline. Again, just be aware that that is Brussels time, and the actual deadline in the UK is 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, as I go through the application form, I'll be using the scroll bar to scroll up and down the page to the relevant sections of the form. I'm going to concentrate on hints and tips for each section of the form as we go through the sections, rather than describing all the information needed. And I will then concentrate on the sections dealing with project activities and budget, showing how these link to each other, as well as giving you hints and tips on how to complete the form. You will need to select the language you are using to complete the application form from the drop-down menu. Now, for applications made to the UK National Agency, this should always be in English, and you'll see there that we've selected English already from that drop-down menu. Now, you'll need to input your start date and choose the duration of your project, which will automatically fill the end date for you. Now, if I just scroll down again, we've pre-filled the form with a start date. Now, the start date must be between the 1st of August and the 31st of December 2016. As I mentioned, the end date will automatically be pre-filled, as will the total duration in months. Okay, so let's go down to section C, and that's for participating organisations. Okay, there we are. Now remember, when you put in your PIC and your partner's PIC numbers, the information will automatically be populated from the information in the participant portal. And now I'm going to just check that by checking the PIC. So we click on that button there, and as you can there now see, it's populated the information, so it's pulled all that through. Now you need to check the details, and if you notice there are any details that are incorrect for you or your partner, they will need to be corrected in the portal. I'm afraid you can't correct them within the application form. Now, all participating organisations need to be identified in the application form, and you won't be able to add partners at a later stage. Now, good quality applications include specific details, so naming the key persons who will be delivering the project and their skills is a very good idea. Explain how your organisation's previous experience of delivering projects or activities has contributed to developing the skills and knowledge needed for the activities you propose in this application. You'll see actually there is space here to give the detail that I'm now mentioning to you as I scroll down. Okay, so include details of the young people your organisation typically works with in terms of geographic location and any additional needs they may have if you feel that that's information that's relevant to your particular project. Please explain how the activities proposed in this application fit into other programs or activities you deliver. This will help the assessors understand what needs and expertise your organisation has, and this will make it easier to see the potential impact of the project on your organisation. Make sure it's clear from the description of each partner's work and expertise why they have been chosen to participate in your project. This applies to all partners, including smaller organisations which may be involved. Okay, so each page of the application has a validate button, so you can check the information as you're going through. So I'm going to click on the validate button there, and it's telling me that there is a piece of information missing, and that's related to type of organisation. So if I click on OK, it will take me to the partner form that I need to update, and we'll select, there we are, we'll select a type of organisation. Now we'll just try and hit that validate button again, and here again it's highlighting that there's an error with an email address saying it's not valid. So if we click on OK, you'll see there that it's an incomplete email address, so we'll just type in a test email address, but in the format that is acceptable. Okay, so let's go down to section D. There we are. Description of the project. Now as we go through the form, I'll just mention to you that some of this is already pre-filled, and you'll see the word test is already within that box of for the description of the project. Okay, so show a clear link here with the priorities of Key Action 3 and of the structured dialogue process by carefully considering the aims of Key Action 3, which are on page 185 of the programme guide. Now with regard to the structured dialogue process, as already mentioned, the theme set by the EU presidency countries for the structured dialogue during the period January 2016 to June 2017 is enabling all young people to engage in a diverse, connected and inclusive Europe that's ready for life, ready for society. You should also think about which of the general priorities for the youth field listed in Part B of the programme guide are relevant. Explain the specific needs or issues your project will address based on a genuine needs analysis you or others have done in relation to the participants and policymakers you plan to involve. Describe the specific needs of specified participants and policymakers and show how your project will respond to these. Now it's very important that you should also demonstrate how the young people you'll be targeting have actively helped shape the project proposal. If you have listed any transnational partners, in case of one or several transnational structured dialogue meetings, you should also link the needs addressed by the project to your partner's country's situation. This will back up your choice of partners. In case you are organising one or several national structured dialogue meetings, you will still need to show that your project's priorities and activities contribute directly or indirectly to the structured dialogue process. Okay, so we're just going to scroll down to section E, that's participants pro. Okay, now it's not sufficient to state the age and gender of your young people rather. You'll need to provide more specific information such as ethnicity and the issues that they face. The same with the policymakers. You should define them and state their priorities or needs as clearly as possible. This information will have to be related to the aims of the project and the gaps it aims to address. Spend some time on the selection process of your participants, as this has also been one of the areas requiring further detail as shown by applications submitted in the previous round. You need to explain in detail what recruitment and selection processes you and any partners will undertake. For instance, how many participants you will involve and how the processes will ensure the most suitable participants are selected whilst ensuring a fair process. For more information about participants with fewer opportunities, please have a look at page 11 of the programme guide. When it comes to working with participants with fewer opportunities, you need to demonstrate that they are relevant to the objectives of your project. If you work with this target group, you should clearly describe their needs in the previous sections of the application. Now, your learning outcomes must also be clearly linked to the aims of your project and relevant to the needs of your participants. That's to say they are agreed with both the young people and the decision makers. Now, please pay particular attention to increasing young people's civic engagement and competencies for active participation in democratic life. Now, don't forget validation of learning outcomes, for example, by using YouthPass or ASDAN, ASDAN, for the UK. It's not sufficient to list them, you also need to explain how you're going to use them. If you are not familiar with YouthPass, you can find out more information on page 273 of the programme guide. Okay, and you'll see there the box on the screen now about how you're going to be using those learning out validation items that you've identified. Okay, so if we move now down to section F, this is preparation. Now mention any preparatory activities that will take place before the start of your project activities, including practical arrangements, and also including anything you have done so far before putting in your application. But please be reminded that funding cannot cover any costs made before the start date of your project. Now let's move down to section G, main activities. Now, one issue we've encountered is that some applications lack detail in this section, which meant that it was not possible to confirm whether the activities were in line with the objectives of the project, to what extent young people were actively involved in all the stages of the project, and whether the methods proposed were appropriate. So you will need to use all the space available and provide plenty of information or plenty of detail here, including, for example, who will actually deliver each activity, and the project management plans and administration around it. All activities will need to use non-formal learning methods such as workshops, role players, outdoor activities or round tables. So please describe here not only the activities but also how the learning is expected to take place. In some applications we received under the previous call, it wasn't always clear which non-formal learning methods would be used. Now you need to demonstrate here how you have ensured that your methods and activities are relevant to your objectives, as well as the learning outcomes and impact you anticipate. Methods should also be suited to both the young people and decision makers you will involve. Okay, I'm going to move down to section G1. To see if we can get you to view all of that. There we are. Okay, so section G1. This is the activities detail section. Now we'll cover this section in more detail as it relates to the activities which will feed into the budget. It's very important to keep in mind that the data here will need to correspond to the data in the budget section, otherwise you will not be able to validate your eForm. The activities that you need to detail in this section are grouped under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. Now you should add a table for each meeting you plan to hold during your project and select a number of answers from the drop-down menus available. And I'm going to actually demonstrate that in a short while. But before doing this, I'd just like to highlight a couple of points. Now if you are organising national meetings, the activities should take place in the country of the applicant organisation. If you're organising transnational meetings, the activities can take place in any of the programme countries involved. This means that a partner from a partner country neighbouring the EU can be involved, but activities cannot take place in that country. Now there is an exception here actually. Now only in duly justified cases, and if the main activity includes elements of dialogue with decision makers at a European level, an activity can take place at the seat of an institution of the European Union. Now, that would be Brussels, Frankfurt, Luxembourg, Strasbourg, and The Hague. Now, you need to annex a completed activity timetable for each activity. This is an Excel file made available for download from the Erasmus Plus website on the How to Apply Key Action 3 Structured Dialogue page. Make sure that the activity timetable is consistent with the narrative and activity details in the application form, for example in terms of duration of the activities. Now you'll need to make sure all details match, as inconsistencies could weaken the score for your application. Now you will also need to use the distance calculator to fill out the distance band. A link to this is provided in your handout. The distance is from cities and towns, so choose the nearest one to your head office and the head office of your partners. The band that comes up is the band which you will need to input into the application form. This will then automatically populate the unit cost. Now the cost is a contribution towards the return journey costs. Please ensure that you put in the right band, as this will be checked at assessment and if incorrect could affect the quality of the application. Right, so I'm going to start filling some information, and whilst I do, I think Raj is going to talk through things with you.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. So I'll talk you through the information Adrian is inputting into the form at the moment. So Adrian has selected national youth meetings from the drop-down menu and selected UK as the country. As already mentioned, you can also choose transnational youth meetings. To work out the correct distance band between the venue and the beneficiary organisation, we'll shortly switch across to the distance calculator. Okay, so this is the distance calculator. The distance calculator works by you inputting the town or city that will be the point of departure and arrival for the meeting. Our test organisation is based in Birmingham and the meeting venue is London. As you can see, as Adrian starts to type the name of the location, the distance calculator automatically suggests locations. Clicking the calculate button provides the distance in kilometres, and it is this number which dictates which distance band you need to select. So we'll now switch back across to the application form to input this information. Okay, so Adrian has selected the distance band that matches the distance calculator. The start and end date need to be selected by clicking on the arrow and using the calendar that pops up. If you just type the date in, it might not be in the correct format and the form might not validate. If any travel days will be included, you will also need to input the number of days. As you can see, we've input 1 travel day. You will need to then input the total number of participants, which includes any accompanying persons if needed. Adrian has put in 50 participants, which includes 40 young participants and 5 accompanying persons. If your project will include participants with special needs or fewer opportunities, you should include the number of these here as well. You can use the plus symbol to add more flows for an activity and the minus symbol to remove the last flow in the list. You can also find that you can add new activities and remove activities using the Add Activity and Remove Activity buttons.
Okay, so we're moving down to section H now, and that's follow-up. So here, some hints and tips actually. Now be as specific as possible about the impact of the project in addressing the need you've identified early in the application form. One area that was not always well developed in the applications submitted during the previous rounds is impact at local, regional, national, European and or international levels. Projects under Key Action 3 should aim to make a long-lasting impact beyond those directly involved by working with organisations that are actively engaging with young people at local level or above. It's important, therefore, that you describe the impact of your project at various levels or policy making. An example could be policymakers being able to engage better with young people. Now for dissemination, you need to show you have carefully planned your dissemination and to mention what messages you want to share, what activities you'll undertake to do this and when. You should be as clear as possible about who you will target with your dissemination activities. The plan for dissemination activities to take place throughout your project lifetime and not just at the end. Have a look at Annex 2 of the Programme Guide, which provides practical guidance on dissemination of your project. Don't forget your evaluation activities should consider the learning outcomes and how the project has contributed to addressing the overall aims of Key Action 3. Detail the qualitative and quantitative indicators of achievement that you plan to use in order to assess whether your project has achieved its objectives and results. You should attach numerical targets to quantitative indicators wherever possible and explain who will be looking after this task. Okay, so we're just going to scroll a little bit further down this application form. Right, okay, and here we are at section I, budget. Now you will find more detailed guidance on how to complete the budget section of the application in our application guidance and in part B of the programme guide. Now getting the budget right is a quality criterion. Projects which are with a correct and duly justified budget are more likely to score high than those that do not. The maximum total grant available for any structured dialogue project is €50,000, so you cannot request more than €50,000 in the grant calculated field in section J.2.1. Now if the calculated grant amount is higher than 50,000, you will need to make adjustments under sections I.2, I.3 and I.4, otherwise it would not be possible to validate the application form. Now I will talk more about budget adjustments later. It is important to note that the budget under all cost headings is built up on a unit cost basis per participant, and that's with the exception of exceptional cost and special needs supports, which are budgeted for and reimbursed on an actual cost basis. So let's just talk a little bit about unit costs. Now these can be understood as set amounts per participant, which is a contribution towards project costs. Now for some unit costs you will spend more, and for some perhaps less than the unit cost. Unit costs are used to help make the funding simpler to understand and manage. Now in terms of actual or real costs, well, as the name indicates, in this case you will receive funding for the actual costs incurred. Real costs are used for the budget heading exceptional costs and special needs support and can be fully or partly reimbursed. Now the budget categories for a Key Action 3 Structured Dialogue project are travel, organisational support, special needs support and exceptional costs. Under travel and organisational support, the budget is calculated on a unit cost basis. Your request for travel funding in section I1 must be linked to the main activities you've detailed in section G. The country of destination should be the country in which the applicant or one of the partners, that's programme countries only, are based. The country of origin and destination will be the UK or any of your partner countries if you plan transnational youth meetings, and young people or policymakers are being sent to the UK from countries in your partnership or vice versa. As mentioned, the exceptions to these are the seats of the European Union. Most of the information has been pre-filled based on the information you already entered into the activity detail section. Now the only part, and you'll see here actually, the only part that you are able to amend is the number of participants. I'm going to demonstrate that you can do so by typing in 60. Now in section I.2, if you need to request your grant for organisational support, that's money to be used for your organisation, management and implementation of your meetings or main activities. Now, once again, most of this information has been pre-filled from the activity details section, so you'll only need to input the number of participants. I'm just going to put in 40 here. Now you will need to check here that the pre-filled information is correct, and if not, you'll need to amend the information under section G1. Okay, so I've just hit the validate button, and it's showing that there's an error there. The field cannot exceed the number of participants of the activity flow. Okay, so it's taken us back to the part of the form that we need to change, and so we'll correct that, and we'll correct that so that it's consistent with an earlier part of the form. We'll put 50 back in. Now, the eForm will still validate if you've included less participants in the budget than you have in the activity in the section G1. So it's worthwhile checking to make sure that you have here the correct numbers. So I'm going to correct things there as well, and we'll add in, again, we'll change that number back on organisational support to 50. Well, really just to highlight, it is possible to change those numbers there, and just to make sure that it is always consistent with the application form. Okay. Now I mentioned earlier that if the total grant is calculated to be more than €50,000 in J2.1, you will need to adjust the number of participants in section I.2 to ensure that the grant calculated is €50,000 or less. Okay, so section I3. Now, to request any special needs support, that is, any additional costs that your organisation or partners will incur to enable participants with disabilities to take part in your meetings, for example, specialist equipment or accompaniment. Special needs support is calculated on an actual cost basis and will be assessed case by case. So therefore, it is important that you make clear in the description of costs box what items you need and the cost breakdown. You should also detail the participation of special needs participants in the main narrative of your application form. Now, section I.4. Now, exceptional costs are to be budgeted as actual costs, and you need to clearly state in the description of costs box why you need these items and the costs breakdown. Things that can be considered as exceptional costs under Key Action 3 structured dialogue are costs connected to online consultations and opinion polls of young people, for financial guarantee and dissemination activities. Up to 75% of eligible costs can be claimed. Expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, up to a maximum of 80% of total eligible costs. However, you will need to justify that the standard funding rules that's based on contribution to unit costs per travel distance band do at least cover at least 70% of the travel costs of participants, or do not, sorry, cover at least 70% of the travel costs of participants. Other exceptional costs like visa and visa-related items, residence permits and vaccinations, as well as costs directly related to participants with fewer opportunities, can also be included, and that's up to 100% of eligible costs can be claimed. Now, it's important to make sure that you've requested either special needs support or exceptional costs, that the total grant calculated as shown in J2.1 is no more than €50,000 again. If it is, you will need to adjust the amounts requested. Okay, so make sure you have clearly described the main activities of your project and that the budget you request is consistent with your description, because budget requests can only be accepted if it is clear what the money is being requested for. As a reminder, a person with special needs is defined under Erasmus Plus as a potential participant whose physical, mental or health-related situation is such that his or her participation in the project would not be possible without extra financial support. Okay, so I'm going to move down to section J, and that's the project summary. Oh. Okay. Now, this summary will be used by the European Commission and the National Agency in their publications and might also feed into the Erasmus Plus project results platform, so this should be kept in mind. It should be written in clear, plain English, avoiding any technical or sector-specific jargon to ensure that it is understood by the general public. Okay, so we'll just move down to section J.1. This is a summary of participating organisations, the budget summary and also the project total grant. So check that all information is absolutely correct. So in case it is not, you can make any necessary changes in the earlier sections. But just to reiterate, you need to make sure your grant request does not exceed €50,000. Okay, well, you'll see here we've been referencing this particular part of the form of section J.2.1, and here it is showing the grant total amount. Okay, so I'm going to move down now to section N, annexes. Okay, I can go way down the form. There we are. Now, the compulsory annexes are the signed declaration of honour, the scanned mandates of each participating organisation to the applicant, signed by both parties, and the completed timetable of activities. Now, these documents can be downloaded from the Key Documents section of our Apply for Youth Dialogue funding page of the Erasmus Plus website. Your project application will be ineligible without the first of these, first two of these attachments. The lack of a completed timetable of activities will mean that your application will receive a lower score under project management and implementation. So please don't forget to do that. Now I'll just switch over to a completed timetable. Okay.
Okay, so just while Adrian fills this in, I'll just cover this section a little bit. So you'll need to use the activity numbers from the application form, and all the information about the venue and duration should match the activity details section of the eForm. You should clearly detail the activities and methods used for each day of the activity, and this should correspond to the information in section G of the eForm. If you have multiple flows within one activity, you should put them all on the same sheet, and you can do this by just copying the table you see here and pasting it below and filling it in for each flow. If you have multiple activities, you can copy this table across to the next sheet and create as many sheets as you have activities. We'll now switch back to the application form.
Okay, so thank you, Raj, for talking through things as I demonstrated quickly the activity timetable. Now, if there is still some room for attachments, once the 3 compulsory annexes are attached, you are able to attach other relevant annexes, such as the needs analysis and a sample work program, for example. Now, a tip here is to keep it concise. We expect that all the information which is key to the quality and content of your project should be included within the main body of the application form. Okay, so if we move down to submission. Now just a few final words here on this submission procedure. Now validate as you go through and after completing the application. I'm going to click on the validate button now, and you'll see there that a field which is mandatory is not completed, and so if I click on OK, I'll be taken to the correct part of the form, and you'll see here that the project summary page or box is actually incomplete. Just for the purpose of today's demonstration, I'm just going to type in test. Okay, and now we can validate the form again. I'm just scrolling down the application. There we are. So the form is now valid. Okay, so section K, if we just have a quick look at that, you'll need to refer to this section. Now that's the checklist, and you'll also need to refer to the data protection notice, which is there. Okay. Now ensure you are connected to the internet when you submit the form. Save the final completed version of your application form to your computer in case of any submission issues. And note the deadline mentioned in the form is Brussels time, so the form needs to be submitted online by 11 AM UK time on Tuesday the 26th of April 2016. We would advise you to leave plenty of time to complete your application and to submit it online well before the deadline in case of any unexpected technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm going to now switch back to our presentation, and I actually think that we're going to have a quick second poll actually now, just to ask you a question. I'm going to ask Raj to launch that poll.
Okay, thank you for voting in our last poll. So it's really positive to see that everyone is looking to apply for the future core. Please ensure you do read the guide for applicants, which we've mentioned a few times prior to submitting your application, just to help you in writing the application. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Raj, and thank you for everybody in taking part in that poll. Okay, so once we've received your application, we do some preliminary checks on the application form. Now, your application will not go forward to assessment if, firstly, your start and end date, as well as the project duration, need to be in line with the criteria specified in the program guide. That's on page 111 of the program guide. So you must make sure that you conform with those requirements. Your budget contribution requested is over 50,000 euros, and you do not have the minimum number of partners in case of a transnational meeting, or if you submit your application after 11 o'clock on the 26th of April 2016. As part of the assessment process, the national agency will also check the requested budget is in line with the funding rules set out in Part B of the programme guide. If these rules are not respected, your requested budget may be reduced on assessment. Now, please make sure you read the program guide and the national agency's guidance available on our website for further details on the eligibility requirements before you submit your application form. Now, the Erasmus Plus national agencies will be validating your organisation and also your partners' organisations. This is a separate process to the assessment of your application. And an important note here is that the fact that your organisation has been validated does not automatically imply a successful outcome for your application. Now, during the validation process, the national agency will check whether all the information you have put into the participant portal is complete and correct. We will check whether the required legal and financial forms have been uploaded, as well as the supporting documents. More information about this can be found in Part C of the Programme Guide, starting on page 237. Now, your partners will also need to be validated by their national agencies. Please note, organisations that are not validated cannot take part in Erasmus Plus funded projects. If you or your partners cannot provide the correct and fully completed documents during the validation process, this may cause significant delays to the processing of your application and may even result in the national agency withdrawing its offer for funding if your application is successful. Okay, so some key points to remember about the budget. Now, the maximum grant that can be awarded for a structured dialogue project is 50,000 euros. Contribution based on unit costs, they're funded automatically, calculated depending on the unit. This can be an amount participants for a certain duration or a set cost per distance travelled, for example. Budget headings using unit costs are travel and organisational support. Now, where there's a contribution based on real costs, budget headings using real costs are special needs support, and that's up to 100%, and as well as exceptional costs. Now, under exceptional costs, you should distinguish between cost-connected consultations and opinion polls of young people, potentially online, costs for a financial guarantee or dissemination activities. Now, this is up to 75% of the costs. For expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, you can request up to 80% of the eligible costs. Any other costs under exceptional costs can be claimed up to 100%. Now, your budget should be appropriate to your activity and demonstrate cost-effective use of resources. Several of the budget lines are conditional on you demonstrating added value, and you will need to clearly justify, especially for real cost, why you are requesting a certain amount of funding. For example, the costs for an opinion poll should be justified, adequate resources used, and costs should be limited to a realistic number of respondents. Okay, so the following documents need to be annexed to the application form. Some of this we covered off earlier, but it is important to reiterate. Now, the Declaration of Honour signed by the legal representative mentioned in the application, the mandates of each partner to the applicant signed by both parties and with the information identical to the information about the partners in the application form, and the timetable of activities template. Now, we recommend where possible you scan different documents together into a single file. If after checking the annexes are within the same size and file formats, format limits, you are still experiencing problems with attaching the annexes, you can email them to erasmusplus@ecorus.com, clearly stating which application form they relate to, and that's by providing the application hash code, as well as your organisation's details and project name. But please only do this as an exception, and ensure that you have followed all the available guidance first. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the application submission. Now, you must ensure you have validated all sections of the application form before submitting. Now, you will need to ensure that you are connected to the internet in order to submit your completed application. You should also ensure that all sections of the form are valid and all annexes are attached before submitting the form. If there are any technical issues preventing the form from being submitted, it will say error under status. If this happens and you are unable to submit the form, you should follow the alternative submissions procedure. In this case, you can still submit your application by sending it via email to us within 2 hours of the official deadline. However, the UK National Agency will only accept applications via the alternative submission procedure if the error message is recorded under status in the submission summary section of the eForm with a time stamp prior to or on the deadline date and time. Now, I'm going to give you some error messages, and you'll see actually on the screen in front of you, that are not accepted as technical issues. Okay, so let's explain those, and as I said, you can see those on your screen right now. ERR01. Now, this is an error which relates to invalid data or missing fields in the eForm. This is not considered to be a technical issue and can be rectified by the applicant by correcting the application form and validating it again. Now, the next one here you can see is ERR06. This error means that there are errors with the annexes. That's to say the total size of the attachment exceeds 5 megabytes, or they're not in the accepted file format specified in section N. This can be rectified either by reducing the size of the attachments or removing them. The next one is unknown, and this means that the eForm was not submitted and no submission attempts were made. Error code local 01. That's an Adobe Reader security enabled. In order to submit the eForm, you must click the appropriate options in the yellow security warning bar at the top of the form. And local 02, that's a network connection error. In order to submit the eForm, you should check your internet connection and try to submit the form again, or try a different network connection. Okay, so before we conclude, here's some key points for you to remember. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents. First of all, the Programme Guide and the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you've received from us, as this will include key areas of improvement, which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Save the form frequently so as not to lose any of the information. Ensure correct options are selected on the application so that important sections aren't deleted. As I've said, while looking through the application form, double check that the budget you request is accurate and well justified, and that you respect the maximum amounts allowed. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents. First of all, the Programme Guide, and also the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you've received from us, as this will include key areas of improvement which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Provide relevant answers to the questions in the application, but remember that there is a character limit on many of the sections. You can see the limit by hovering your mouse over the answer boxes. Get someone else to proofread your application annexes, providing or perhaps against the published award criteria. I think that's a useful point actually. The award criteria are included within the Programme Guide, and it is useful to check the application against those to make sure that each are covered. Now leave enough time for completing and submitting your application before the deadline of the 26th of April 2016. So to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support the UK National Agency will be offering in the run-up to the 26th of April deadline for applications to be submitted under Key Action 3. Now, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you in the next couple of days. After this webinar, you will be redirected to a feedback form, and I would ask that you do take time to fill the form out, as we do aim to continuously improve these webinars and have taken previous feedback on board when creating the webinar for this particular round. A detailed guide for applicants and how to fill out and submit the application form is available on our Erasmus Plus website. If you haven't already done so, please do sign up to our newsletter, as this provides all the most up-to-date information about the core and about the Erasmus Plus program. Now, on our website you can find other important information and documents, for example the timetable of activities, so we recommend you refer to these. We also have a helpline where our team is available to answer your questions about your Key Action 3 application. So thank you all for your attention today and your participation. We'll be around for a couple more minutes to answer any final questions via the chat box. And if there are any more that come up, please contact us via the erasmusplus@ecorus.com email address or on the number on the screen in front of you. Our team's available every day from Monday through to Friday to answer any queries you may have via email or via the helpline. You can see the number on the slide, and you can also find it in your handout. Now, Raj is busily trying to keep on top of all the questions that you've been asking. I'm very grateful that you've posed those to us. But if there aren't any questions that we, or if there are any questions that we don't get time to answer today, we will email you back later on. Now, do also keep an eye on the Erasmus Plus website for news and further guidance. Now, we hope you found the session useful today, and we wish you luck with your future applications. And as I mentioned, we will just be around just for a few more minutes just to complete any further questions that you may have, or answer any further questions that you may have. But that now concludes the formal part of this presentation. So thank you very much again.